this is just a quick check. I guess the chat window is open. So if you can hear me and if you can see me, can you just put down some comments in the chat window? All right. So yeah, this is one of our first live streams, so to say, and we're truly excited. Today's topic is implementing extended events part 1. And before we begin, I know some of you had joined in and you were waiting. We are supposed to start now, but give us a few minutes because some attendees just emailed us that they got a bit miscommunicated about the time. We had actually put as 10:30 UTC plus 5. So they thought that we will be streaming a little later, but we are now sending them the fresh communication. So it will take just about 5 minutes or so, 5 to 10 minutes. So hang around and we are going to start in probably 10 minutes. The content that I have, we will cover it the way I am supposed to cover it. So there are going to be no shortcuts here, but a slight delay. So just hold on for 5 minutes. If you have any questions, feel free to use the chat window and ask us, no issues. And I want to make sure that all of you can hear me and see me. That is important. So in case you're not able to hear or see me, please use the chat window. We'll try to assist you. And Zoom as a tool has a very good feature. If you are on YouTube, great. But if you are trying to come on the Zoom client, let's say some of you who are watching me live right now in YouTube, on the page SQL Maestros /live from where you got access to YouTube, you can go to that page and there is a Zoom link available. So if you want to come online on Zoom client, you can then watch the screen as well as me talking, and you can resize the video. So those who are on Zoom right now, you can run the client in full screen, and then you get the option of resizing the video as well as the full screen mode, which is the desktop that I'm going to share when I'm showing you the demo. So that's a good feature in Zoom if you want to leverage that. All right, everyone, we are ready to begin. Thanks for joining. This is one of our first live streams in SQL Maestros, and this is going to be a quick one. We were testing a few things with YouTube, Facebook, Zoom, and how we can integrate stuff. So there were definitely a few technical glitches as well, but then we are all good to begin. Now, before I begin, my name is Amit Bansal, and I work for SQL Maestros. And of course, me and my team members, we do a lot of stuff with SQL Maestros and SQL Server, and on the community front, data platform geeks and SQL Server geeks. So in case you're not aware, apart from this live stream, we have 2 more live streams today. One is at about India time 1:30, which is UTC plus 6 or so. That is with Dr. Greg Lowe on Enterprise Power BI. And then about later in the evening, we have one more with Anthony Nocentino and Ben Weisman on Kubernetes and big data clusters. So, I mean, it's full day of training. In case you just want to know more, you can put some info on the chat window and my people can help you out there. So today's topic is implementing extended events in SQL Server. That's what we are going to do. Now, I want to interact a bit with you. So if you are on YouTube, you can use the YouTube chat window. So I will just turn around and see the chat coming in YouTube. And if you're on Zoom, you can use the Zoom chat window. So first things first, can all of you hear me and see me? That's important. Then I'll start explaining stuff. You can use the chat window and just let me know if you can hear me. And if you are able to see me. And my colleagues Satya and Aarti, they're also there in the background who are helping me around with this. So Satya, you can say hi to the audience. Are you there? Aarti?
Yeah. Hi, everyone.
Okay, great. Perfect. So yeah, we're getting some responses that everything is good. Okay, so let's begin. No slides, nothing. We are just talking about extended events, and I'm going to give you a short demo also. I'll request Satya to put down the important links up there in the chat window. So extended events. Now, first question that I want to ask all of you, because you've joined this session, what is your experience with extended events? I created a small poll. Let me see if the poll works, and I can launch the poll, and it's on your screen now. You can see the poll on your screen and you can participate. Do you use extended events? Option one is you're already using it in production. Option two is you're in the process of doing it for the first time. Then the third option is you've heard of it, but you've never used it. And the fourth is, of course, you just don't know what is extended events, but because you saw SQL Server in the title, you thought you should join. Okay, so some responses are coming in and looks like the audience is good, but we do have some people who are already using it in production. So I'm sure you will probably have some questions around some issues that you might be facing. So happy to take them at the end of the session. So majority, more than 50% responses are you have heard of it, but you have not used it, which is absolutely fine. You are probably the best target audience for this session. Okay, so let me end the polling and get started. Okay, now I will go full screen with the video, and that is done. All right, so what are we talking about in extended events? Now, as a SQL Server developer and DBA, you have a daily requirement of capturing performance data. So as a developer, you want to capture performance data related to your T-SQL queries, your workloads, what is the duration, how much CPU time, how much reads or writes they are doing. And why do you want to capture this performance data? You want to capture it because you may want to tune your queries. And without the right metrics, it is very difficult to do any kind of query tuning. So for developers also, extended events is important. But more important are for even for DBAs, and DBAs want to collect whole lot of data, just not query statistics. You may want to capture query stats, but you may also want to capture wait statistics. You may want to capture a lot of always on information. You may want to capture changes that are happening to your database environment, or configuration changes that are happening at the server level. So there are a lot of these things that you may want to capture, and you can do that with extended events. Now, there is one myth or misconceptions that extended events is not for developers. And that is the reason why I began by exclaiming that no, extended events is also for developers, specifically when you want to get into query tuning. You want to tune your T-SQL queries and you want to tune your workloads. Now, the moment I talk about extended events and capturing performance data and doing tuning activities or recording all these metrics, the first tool that will come to your mind is Profiler. I'm sure all of you have been using Profiler. Can you put something down in the chat window? I mean, just say yes, yeah. How many of you have used SQL Server Profiler, the very popular age-old tool to capture performance metrics? And I'm sure many of you have done that. Okay, so I can see a lot of responses there. And obviously, I'm sure 90% of you would have been using Profiler. Now, the point is, Profiler has been very popular. The graphical user interface is also acceptable. It's not the best, but let me tell you, even in extended events, graphical user interface is not very fancy. And in some places, it's not very conducive also. But then it does the job. Now, first things we need to know, what is the problem with Profiler? Profiler is like an external tool. It's not a code. It's not an application that is built inside the SQL Server engine. It is an external tool. It is running on top of SQL Server. And one of the biggest challenges with Profiler is that it consumes a lot of resources. So if you're running Profiler or you're running Trace, either way, it is putting a lot of pressure on your SQL Server box. Over the years, the Microsoft SQL team and people who are working with pretty high-end SQL Server deployments have observed that if you are adding a lot of events in Profiler and you are watching the live feed in the Profiler window, you will see that it has a drastic impact on SQL Server in terms of performance, which means you are using Profiler to capture performance data, and Profiler itself is causing performance issues. That has been one of the biggest challenges. And as I said, that is not a tool that is put inside the SQL Server engine. It is an external tool running on top of SQL Server surface. Problem number one. Problem number two is when you are using Profiler and you add all those events and columns and attributes and you want to filter, you may not know, but the filter works a little differently in Profiler. It captures a lot of information from the database engine, and then based on your filter, it removes that extra information that you do not want. Which means think about the filtering aspect. Filtering aspect is not happening inside the engine where the data is getting collected. Filtering happens after the data gets collected, and you want to remove the data based on the filter that you do not want, which is the core reason why there is so much of overhead on SQL Server due to Profiler. The third reason, of course, is that because it was an external tool, there were a lot of limitations with Profiler, and most important limitations were that you cannot do deep dive troubleshooting with the SQL Server database engine. Talk about weight stats, talk about advanced troubleshooting related to memory, CPU, ring buffers, and whatnot. Those things were not possible with the Profiler, simply because the technology did not allow you to do that. So of course there were in early 2000, I mean, I would say this thought began with the release of SQL Server 2005. Yes, I'm talking about like 15, 20 years back, that a new tool or a new technology has to be implemented, and Profiler is not going to be scalable going forward. And then in SQL Server 2008, Microsoft team came with extended events. Now, unfortunately, in SQL Server 2008, when extended events was launched, there was no graphical user interface. Now, think about people like you and me, developers and DBAs who have been very actively using Profiler, and suddenly are given a replacement like extended events with no graphical user interface, and someone tells us that, okay, whatever you were trying to do in Profiler, now start doing in extended events, but there is no GUI, and you have to write down everything. You have to type down all the code and implement everything by coding and programming. Then of course, there is going to be a bit of resistance. And I would not say a bit of resistance. There was a lot of resistance. Two reasons. One, there was no GUI, and that led to reduced acceptance and let's say implementation of extended events. And the second was because it was the first release of extended events, it wasn't really great. There were issues with the tool. It was not really foolproof, and there were some rough edges. A few things did not work. And of course, with every release, as it happens in software world, it was a bit buggy also. So these two things combined together, the adoption rate of extended events was very low. And then people resorted back to using Profiler because at least Profiler was, good to go and well tried and tested, and it was doing the job. Fair enough. Then came SQL Server 2012. And in 2012, there was a complete revamp of extended events. Graphical user interface was added. A lot of those events which were a bit buggy and patchy, they were fixed and things started working a lot better. Many new features, new events got added into extended events, which were not available in Profiler. And many of those events aligned with new features that were coming in SQL Server or were about to come in SQL Server in the versions like 2014, 15, 16, so on and so forth. So I would say starting from 2012 onwards, extended events is the tool that you should look forward to when you want to do things that you were doing in Profiler. As I speak to you today, there was obviously I do have some motivation as to why did I choose this topic. So today we are doing part one, and next week on Thursday again, we are going to do part two. And of course, in part two, I'm going to show you more demos. I will show you demos today as well. But today I'm really talking this out to you to kind of make sure that all of us are on the same page. And I'm one amongst you, which is, of course, I also did not really adopt extended events early on. I was playing around with it. I tried a few things, but then I also resorted back to Profiler. Now, coming back to 2012, when you had this graphical user interface available and extended events infrastructure and framework started working a lot better, I started giving extended events a more serious approach, a more serious consideration. And let me tell you, it worked wonders. Today, as I speak to you in 2020, in this year, I have stopped using Profiler at all. I am only using extended events now. A lot of things that I was doing in Profiler, I have migrated. I have told all our clients, I've consulted them, I've trained them, I have handholded them to move from Profiler to extended events. And I'll tell you, is much, much better, both for developers and DBAs. So that was a bit of history, a bit of background. Now let's talk more about extended events. So when you talk about this comparison between extended events and Profiler, and I am always saying that extended events is much better, both in terms of technology, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of events that you can capture, in terms of the deep dive troubleshooting that you can do, which is not possible with Profiler. But there's one thing that is missing in extended events, but then you got to live with that. Now, and use the chat window to answer this question. How many of you know, or how many of you are aware, or probably have done something like this? In Profiler, if you remember, you can capture the trace and you have the complete trace data. And at the same time, you are capturing some performance metrics in Perfmon window, right? The performance monitor application. And do you know, or have you seen, or have you done it, where you actually join both of that data? It's like putting and combining them together, so you can see that if there are certain spikes in some performance monitor metrics, you can actually go and look into the trace at that point in time, what exactly was running. How many of you have done something like that? Raise your hand. Yes, and if you have not done it, say no, no problem, in the chat window. Okay, so I say Zaim has said no, B positive, no, Claire Proctor, no. Okay, we have all fancy names in our attendees, B0AF6361. Okay, Divyanshu says no. Okay, none of you have done that. Well, if you have not done that, no worries, because you can't do that in extended events also. But if you want to try that out, maybe you can go and play around with Profiler. But that was a good thing. It wasn't bad. It used to give us some insights into what was going on when there were peaks. So just to call this out, not everything is very honky dory with extended events. That one thing you cannot do in extended events as yet. But then other than that, there's everything that you can do in extended events, and a lot more than what is offered by Profiler. Now, talking about trade-off, and as I said, because of this one small limitation, it is definitely not a showstopper for me to not use extended events. What extended events has to offer is a lot more and much better in comparison to what Profiler had offered. So with this basic introduction, let's go ahead and let me start showing you something in extended events with a very basic demo and talking about the concepts, and I will implement it. I will run some workload. I will capture it. I will filter it. I will group. I will aggregate, and I will show you all of that stuff. And I will show you some cool stuff, cool features with extended events also. But then beyond that, let us then more advanced demos I am going to do in part 2. So are we all set for the demo? Let's begin. If you have questions, use the Q&A panel. And if you're on YouTube, you can use the YouTube chat window. My team will compile all the questions. And then at the end of the session, I will answer all the questions. So let me share the screen and get started with extended events. There you go. And I just need some confirmation. Can you see the SQL Server Management Studio with some code out there, AdventureWorks 2016, blah, 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 there? Okay, so I can see 2 participants have raised their hands. Is there any concern? I'm not sure if you're able to see the screen. Okay, all of you can see this. That's good. Sorry, I just minimized it and I'm back again. Okay. Now, if you are using the Zoom client, let me tell you, there's a good feature in this Zoom client which you may not be aware. So this is not for YouTubers. If you're watching me on YouTube, you may want to go to sqlmaestros.com/live. I'll call this out. This is only for people who are watching me on YouTube. If you want to come over to Zoom, you can go to sqlmaestros.com/live, Live. And right on the top, you will see a link, which is Zoom link. I mean, it will say click here, and you can click on that, enter the password, the meeting code, and you can join in. And in Zoom, so those who are on using the Zoom client right now, there's a good feature. The client, in the client, you can actually run it in full screen. When you run it in full screen, of course, you can see the management studio, the screen that I'm sharing, and my video. I've turned on the video so you can see me, and that window it will come as a separate window, and you can increase the size of that window. So while I'm speaking, if you want to see me in a bigger way and watch the demo as well, you can do that, because by default, the video comes very small. So many people are not aware of that you can increase the size. So I just wanted to call out. So let's get started. Extended events. Now, in the Object Explorer, you have management, and under management, you have extended events here. And let me just zoom in a bit, and you can see extended events out there. And under extended events, you have sessions, and there are some sessions out there. Now, these sessions that you see in extended events, many of these concepts work very similar to Profiler. So, some terminologies related to trace, they're kind of very similar. So conceptually, you will not find too many differences, and it will be quite easy for you to understand. The sessions that you see here right now, always on health, system health, telemetry, etc., they are configured by default. I'm using SQL Server 2019. Now, depending on which version of SQL Server you are in, you may or may not see some of these events. These are the default events. Now, you can see always on _ health is a session that is already configured, but it is currently stopped. It is not running. You can see the stop icon there, but the other two are automatically running, which means something is running by default and it is already capturing information. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, what I want to do is, going by the same Profiler terminology, I want to create a session. So when I right click on the session, I have two options. I can either use the wizard, or I can just go to the new session dialog box and I can configure. I'm not going to go to the wizard because wizard is relatively very, very simple and straightforward. I mean, just few screens, next, and you are done. Rather, let me go to the new session dialog box where I can get a few more options, and that is better. So what I am trying to do now is create a new session. Now, I want to, let's say, capture query statistics. Now, I'm using query statistics because that's the most frequent use of extended events, so to say, something similar to what we were doing in Profiler. So let's put the session name as query stats. Now you can create a blank session and then manually add the events and choose necessary fields and attributes and filters, etc. But you can also choose certain templates. So there are templates given to you, and you can see there is query execution templates, etc. System monitoring, activity tracking, a lot of all that is there as templates. One interesting thing that you will note here is that you have some Profiler equivalents, which is, remember, in Profiler also, when you were creating traces, you actually had those templates. So these are very similar to Profiler templates, which means they will give you the same events and the same fields. Plus, it will give you a lot more than what was available in Profiler. Now, for the purpose of demo, I'm going to take a blank template because I'm going to show you things from scratch. So I'm taking the blank template, and here are some options. Start the event session at server startup, which means when you start SQL Server or when you restart, do you want this event to start automatically? So let's say yes, you want to do that. Start the event session immediately after the creation. Do you want to run the session immediately the moment we apply and click OK and whatnot? Yes, you want to do that. And you want to watch the live data. And let's do that. So you want to watch the live data the way you were doing in Profiler. Okay. Now that is on the general page. Very simple. Only three options: name and the template. Now let's go to the events. Now this is the screen where you are going to spend most of your time. This is the place where you're going to configure the events that you want to capture. And let me call out, this graphical user interface is not very intuitive. It's not the one of the best, but it just does the job, so to say. So what I want to do is, now all of you know, right? You want to capture query statistics. So what do you want? You want stored procedure, SP statement starting, SP statement completing, SQL statement starting, SQL statement completing, batch starting and batch completing, and all of that. So let's take SP underscore. When I type SP underscore, let me expand the window here, and you can see that there is SP statement. Let me expand these columns first a bit so that it just becomes a little more easy for you to see. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in and show you a few things. So now what you will see, that the moment I filter on SP here in the event library, you can see that I have SP underscore statement completed and starting. When I select either of these events, you can see all the event fields on this in this dialog box here, and it gives you a description also. So SP underscore statement starting, you get the description. It states it's stored procedure statement starting. Let me zoom in a bit. Okay, and statement starting. So you get your events here. You're getting the description of the event. You get the default fields that are going to be captured, and you get the description. Now, when you look at this total interface here, couple of things. When you choose a particular event, there is also something called as category of the events. I'll show you what are the different categories. Now, this of course comes under the execution category. There is also called as channel. Channel is analytic, means analysis. These are different ways on how you can filter events, because I'll tell you there are hundreds of events that you may find here. And there is also something called as package, and package right now says SQL Server. Events are actually configured inside packages. Now, of course, one of the most popular package here is SQL Server. Most events that are related to SQL Server will come under this package. Now, there's another package called SQL OS, for example. So if you are capturing information metrics, that is the operating system about of SQL Server, which is a lot of information related to CPU, memory, resource management, threads, stacks, and whatnot, that will all come under SQL OS. So category, channel, package, these are different techniques on how you can just filter your events. Nothing more than that. Then comes the event fields. Now, this is not a no-brainer to you. All of you know that there are event fields that you can capture, and you can see with each event what are the different fields that will come along with it. When you choose a particular event, you have to in Profiler, if you remember, you had that option of unchecking a particular field. You can actually choose which field you wanted. But here in extended events, when you choose a particular event, the default payload, which means all the fields that you see right now on the screen, will come by default. You don't have a choice here that let's say you don't want the object ID or the object name or the object type. These will come by default. And now, of course, one of the questions that will come to your mind is this going to add any overhead or so? Absolutely not. The default payload that comes is coming right from the engine. Remember, as I talked about, extended events is a framework that is built in with SQL Server code. So it's about like putting a breakpoint in SQL Server code, and everything is default available. So you're just kind of capturing it. So don't worry about any overhead here. Take these default fields the way they are, and you have the option of choosing more additional fields, which I'm going to show you in a while. So let's take, now when I choose this statement completed and statement starting, and then here again, because it's not very intuitive, see there is an arrow here on the right hand side, and right now selected events, if you see this corner there, right now selected event section is blank, and there is this arrow here, and I can click on this arrow, get the events from the left side to the right side, which means I'm adding them. Okay, so let's add them. I've added SP. Now you can see I've added SP underscore statement, starting and completing. So what else you want? You want, let's say, SQL. So I'll just put SQL. So we have SQL batch completed, SQL batch starting. Let's take that also. These are very similar to what you had in Profiler. Okay. And then we had SQL statement completed and SQL statement starting. Let's take these also. I will tell you, if I'm myself, I will also take recompile, but not at this point because this is just a quick demo on using. So I've taken, now this is where the problem with the interface is. I can't just resize this portion. So I can just read from here. So I've taken SP statement completed, SP statement starting, which is to do with stored procedures. I've taken SQL batch completed, occurs when a T-SQL batch has finished execution. So you know what a batch is. A batch can have multiple statements, including a statement that is calling the stored procedure. And when the stored procedure gets called, then SP statement starting and completing will happen. And inside stored procedures, you might have multiple statements. And when they get fired, then these events are going to be called, which is SQL statement completed and SQL statement starting. Now, with this, let me minimize the, okay, so this was the original screen that we had. We took this, okay. Now, there is a configure button there that you can see. And let's click on this configure button. And you go to the next page of this particular screen. So you see there are, it's like previous and next. So I go back, I've chosen my events. Now I can go and configure. What can I configure? I have, let's expand again. I have the statements on the left-hand side here, selected events, not statements, sorry, selected events on the left-hand side. And now with each of these events, I have global fields. So now you can look at these terminologies. So the events that you have selected are here, and they all come with default payload, which is the default fields. But if you want extra stuff, then comes the global fields. Technically, they are called as actions, extra things that you want. And look at some of those things here. Now, if I select all the events together, it will give me all the common fields that are common to all the events. Right now, only one event is selected, which is SQL statement starting. So it's going to give me all the extra fields that I can capture based on SQL statement starting. So you may want to take up some of those columns. The next option here is to filter. You know this very well, right? Right in Profiler, we used to filter. Like, for example, you only want to capture stats for a specific database or a specific user, or you may want to filter on SPID, those kind of things. So that is for your filters. And event fields is just kind of a read-only display of what fields are being now selected. So let's zoom out. And at this point, I can just take, let's say, common fields. So if I select all the events here, all the fields, all the events here have, let's say, database ID and database name. As you can see here, these two. Let's just take the database name just for the sake of demo. Now, when you go back to the filter here, and now let's say when I am going to run the demo, I'm going to run this on AdventureWorks 2016. So I'm going to filter on, let's say, SQL. So you can see even the predicates, they are in package. So you can see all the packages here, SQL OS, package 0, as I was talking about. So let's take on SQL Server database name. I say SQL database name, and then I say equal to AdventureWorks 2016. Okay. And let me just kind of expand this to show you what have I done. Okay, there you go. So I've put a filter predicate that for all of these events, my filter is that I only want to capture the metrics for AdventureWorks 2016. And event fields will give me showing me blank. Let me just select. So this will give me the details of all the event, all the fields that are coming with each event. And if you want additional information, you can check mark some of these things that are there. Like, say you want object name, for example, that information will come. So parameters. So when you're calling SQL statement completed, if they are being parameterized, then you may want to capture that information, so on and so forth. That's there. And let's go to data storage. Now, once you've configured all the events and the fields, now let's go to the data storage. And here you just like Profiler, again, you have to choose your target. Where do you want to store this information? Now, I'll cover this. This is quite important because now, unlike Profiler, this has many options. You can, of course, write to the event file, which is the most popular way of capturing information and persisting it so that you can analyze later. But then this has beautiful targets like pair matching, like histogram. Histogram, if you just want to maintain count of something, for example, how many times recompilation has happened, you don't really want a lot of stuff there other than just the count to compare with the previous benchmark. So some of these targets are really good. Histogram, and then there is pair matching. I'll explain that in part 2. Ring buffer, which is the memory, and where you can put the default data, and it gives you a small, very small chunk of the memory where the most recent data can reside. So let's go and take ring buffer for the time being, and I'll just go by the default values out here, which means I'm consuming only a very small portion of memory, and I want to store the data here. So number of events to keep, let's say 1000. Maximum buffer 0 means unlimited. You definitely do not want that. Maybe you just want to put some number out there. Let's say 10 MB or something, and keep specified numbers per type in the buffer is full. So you can even filter on the number of events. The number of events that you want to keep. So let's say I just want to keep, let's say 2000 events, and nothing beyond that, just calling it out for the purpose of demo. Then there are certain advanced options, which is not for this session right now. We'll talk about it later, but then for a basic implementation of extended events, you're good with the default options. Now this, let's go and click on OK, and this gets created, and now you can see in the live window. So I'll pull this up again. Okay, so let me close this. You can, first thing you will see that your extended events is created here. The event, which is query stats, the session got created. And if you expand, the package ring buffer is the target, and you can right click on query stats here and watch live data, very similar to the way in Profiler you were getting. So now you get the name of the event and when the event occurred. So this is running live, and you have a lot of options here on the toolbar right now. Most of them are disabled because you're seeing the live feed that is coming in. Now let's go and run some events and capture it. So I have a small stored procedure here. I'm using AdventureWorks. So let's go and execute this stored procedure, execute my report. When I run this, let's see what gets captured and how you can play around with it. So when I execute this takes a few seconds and the report is run. Let's go back to the live window, and you have the events getting captured. Now you can see SQL batch starting, SQL statement starting, and look at all the fields and the values that are coming up at the bottom. Now, this is the interesting thing that you need to notice. So let me just align this a bit, and there you go. So statements, let me select batch starting, and okay, this is what I want to show you. Okay, and let me zoom now. So what do you see? You are seeing that number of these events fired because you executed, the stored procedure. So the stored procedure fired, it was the beginning of the batch, beginning of the stored procedure, and the statements inside it. And now you can see for every event that you select there, you can see all the fields and their values that were being captured. Okay, and now you can actually see, for example, right, the statement that was there in the stored procedure. And now I've selected starting. So you know that starting will not have duration or CPU, rather completed will have. So if I go and look at batch completed, then you can see more interesting information that you really care about, which is, for example, CPU time, right? The duration, the logical reads, right? These are the most important metrics that you want, and they get captured. Now, this is live data that is coming in, but now what do you do with it? And if let's say I want to execute this a couple of times, so, you know, there's going to be, is it running right now? Okay, yes, that's running. Let's run this a few more times. I'm running this a third time, and now I'm running this a fourth time. So in real world, in your production, what is going to happen is you're going to get a lot of these events. Now, it is not really intuitive to kind of keep scrolling between all these events. How do you filter? How do you group? How do you only find out the information that you want? First things first, what are the important fields for you? As I said, the important fields for me are, let's say, CPU time. So what I'm going to do is right click CPU time and show the column in the table. What else? Duration is important for me, so right click, show the column in duration. And let's say reads is important for me. No, not logical reads, let's say physical reads. So right click. Okay, just for the demo, let's take logical reads and show them in the table. Now you can see I have 40 events that are being displayed if you keep your focus on the top portion there, and you have all these fields that are coming in. Now what can you do? When I keep scrolling, let's say certain durations are important for me. So let me show you some very small but very powerful features here. Now let's pause the data for the time being, which is stop the data feed, because I want to play around with this right now. So let's say SP statement completed, and I have a duration here 3224. So this is in microseconds, by the way. So what I can do is, let's say this was some duration 322, but then if I come down, let's say another particular statement, the value is quite high. So I want to compare between the two. So let's go and take another SQL statement completed. So I can, on the toolbar, if you see, there is a toggle bookmark feature. So you got to know these things, not easily visible because it's there right in the corner there, toggle bookmark. Okay. And I will select this, let's say toggle bookmark, and I've got the first bookmark here, and I want to compare this with this particular event, and I can go again. Oops, the mouse is not there. Okay, and select toggle bookmark. Now look at this. The shortcut for previous bookmark is Shift Alt P, and the next bookmark is Shift Alt N. Now I'm pressing my keyboard, so you won't be able to see me pressing the keys on the keyboard, but this is what is happening. See, if you see, I am shifting between the two bookmarks. I'm pressing P and then N again, and I can compare the numbers. So this is like toggling between the events that I've highlighted. Very cool feature, very good, and I mean, useful, very useful to, analyze. Once you're done, you can clear all the bookmarks, right? Now, next thing, another feature. So you have this data, you want to do some analysis. And of course, when you look at all these, like this matrix of data, it is not very meaningful. So what you can do, you can sort the data, you can filter, and you can aggregate. So now you can see there are two options there, grouping and aggregation. So grouping and aggregations are very powerful. So first thing what you may want to do is click on this arrow, and okay, so let's go to grouping first. Click on the grouping, and you have all the available columns that you are showing in the metric. So you may want to group by them. Now, grouping by CPU time duration doesn't make sense, but what you may want to group by is the event name. So let's go and click on OK here. Now see what happens. So all the events that you had added into this particular session, you're grouping by those events. Now it becomes a lot more meaningful for you to drop down. So drill down on this information. So for example, statement completed, SP statement completed, because this is going to give you the CPU, IO, and so on and so forth. So you can see all the SP statement completed and what their numbers were. And here also you can sort the data, isn't it? So what you can do is click on CPU time, and now I'm clicking on CPU time. So you can see I'm sorting on ascending, descending, and you can see the data changing. This is beautiful. This is very good, because let's say duration, for example. So you get the statement that caused maximum duration, took maximum time, right, coming on top. So you're playing around with it. So grouping is a great feature. Another good feature that comes with grouping is aggregation. So if you click on aggregation, what do you want to really aggregate on? And of course, numerical values out there. So you can aggregate on CPU time, duration. And one of the things that you want to do is, let's say you can group on object name, for example, and because stored procedure has object name, and then let's say you can do an aggregation on duration, like what was the average execution time of the stored procedure or a particular statement. So let's say you want to do an average of all the duration. And now if you scroll down, you are able to see the average. So you can see that the average of these four values is right up here. So you're doing the aggregation. Now, this is really all about performance metrics, isn't it? You want to capture this data, you want to filter, you want to compare. So you have the toggle bookmark feature, you want to group by, you want to aggregate, you want to sort. And another powerful feature, which is you want to filter. So you have the filter capability also. Now, let's say we captured this data. So it gives you this filter dialog box where you have from this time to the end time, which is the start time and the end time. You can also click on set time filter, and you can move this slider, which is you may just want to focus on when there were performance issues and just want to play around with that much data, because you may have captured this for the whole day, or let's say for 5 hours or 2 hours, but you just want to focus on, let's say, 15 minutes. So you can use these fields, or you can use this slider. And you can also filter on the fields. One of the filters that we applied was when we were capturing the event information, when we were configuring the events, and we put for AdventureWorks 2017. But let's say you want to filter on the data, let's say duration. So give me all the events where duration was greater than certain value. This is very, very powerful. Let's say what has happened is you're capturing hundreds and thousands of workloads are coming and hitting SQL Server, and you have all sorts of durations starting from 1 millisecond to a million milliseconds. Now, of course, you don't want to focus on queries that have just taken a few milliseconds. You may want to focus on queries or workloads that have taken, let's say, minutes to run. And then you can filter on duration, and you can say where all these, wherever the value was greater than something. And remember, this is in microsecond. So let's say I've just put something 60,000 or whatever, right? And you apply. So now what you do is you only get those events where the value was greater than 60,000 microseconds. So friends, in part one, this is what I wanted to quickly show you, which is the introduction to extended events, a brief history, comparison with Profiler. Remember, Profiler is deprecated. Microsoft is not making any more investments in Profiler. So you're not going to really see any improvements in Profiler. I think it has been since 2008. There has been no improvement in Profiler. If there is something, maybe I've missed it. But to the best of my knowledge, there has been no improvement in Profiler. It does not even have anything to do with new features like automatic tuning, adaptive joint, memory grant feedback, intelligent query processing. It has nothing at all. You can just use it the way you were using it in the old days. So that's why extended events is something that is so important. And then we are seeing these very basic elementary demos. Idea was to make you familiar with the interface, how you can create and how you can capture basic stats. Now, next Thursday in part 2, I'm going to jump into more advanced examples and demos on how you can really put extended events into production, and what are the things you may really want to bother about. For developers, for example, deadlocks. For DBAs, weight statistics. For everybody, tracking page splits. These are some advanced examples that I'm going to show in part 2. So with this, let me go back and now take some questions, and I'll ask my colleague Satya to put the some links for you. So visit sqlmaestros.com, more videos and some content, video courses, free videos, blogs, scripts, a lot of stuff is available on sqlmaestros.com. We have video courses also. They're not free, they're paid, but you may want to browse if they're good for you. And also take a moment to visit the website of Data Platform Virtual Summit, which is the upcoming event that we have. Not sure if Satya is online. He's putting up the text out there. Okay. And now I am ready to invite questions. So if you're on YouTube, please use the YouTube chat window to put down your questions. And if you're on Zoom, you can use the Q&A panel. Satya, are you there? Can you hear me? Okay, feedback from the attendees who are live now on Zoom and YouTube. Was this worth your time? I mean, did you get the hang of extended events, at least for some of you who were new to extended events? Okay, questions. So yeah, some links are up there, friends. So, I'll just call out those links. One is Twitter. You may follow me on Twitter, _Bansal. sqlmaestros.com. I'm sure all of you are aware because that's how you got into today's live stream session. If you want to subscribe to my newsletter, where I talk about a lot of technical stuff, which is bit.ly/connectwithav. If you want some scripts and examples that I've used today. I didn't use too many scripts, but if in case you want, you can always drop an email to connectwithab@sqlmaestros.com. Please put a subject as SQL Maestros live stream 1, and #1 will keep incrementing as we do more stuff. And as I said, Data Platform Virtual Summit is a community event that we are organizing. Take a moment to visit this. It's going to be one of the largest online learning event on Microsoft Azure data, SQL Server, Power BI, AI, and whatnot. More than 200 sessions are going to be delivered. And the best part is attendees are going to get all the recordings of those 200 sessions at no extra cost. And there are going to be 30 training classes as well. Right, questions. So I can see in Q&A, Barak, yes, this was a good introduction. Thanks, Barak. Thanks for joining. And more questions. I saw one question in the chat window who had put it. So I request that gentleman to put it in the Q&A window. How deadlocks can be displayed in extended events. So be positive. That's the name of the attendee. So be positive. Good name, by the way. Be positive. You can capture deadlocks using extended events. And I'm going to show this in part 2. But because you have asked this question, I will tell you the system health session that is configured by default, which is running by default, gives you XML deadlock report as an event. It is automatically configured, which means now for deadlocks, for capturing deadlocks, you don't have to use Profiler. You don't even have to turn on those trace flags. I don't even remember what those trace flags were, probably 1224 and 1225. You don't have to do all of that. XML deadlock report as an event is already configured in system health session, which is running by default. And I'm going to show that to you in part 2, how it automatically gets captured and you can explore it. All right. Any more questions? Any questions in Satya? Any questions in the YouTube chat? If there is, please let me know.
No questions in YouTube.
Okay. All right. Looks like. Okay, great, Barak. Thank you for all the feedback. And yeah, thank you very much, friends, for joining. Please visit sqlmaestros.com, register for the next live stream, which is next Thursday. And I'm just going to continue from where I've stopped, which is part 2. And hope you will have fun watching part 2, because part 2 is going to be all demos. And that's where it is. And yes, if you like the session, give some feedback on social media, right? On your Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Tag us, tag me if you're connected with me. A_Bansal is my Twitter handle. Thank you very much for joining, and thanks for coming. Have a good day. We have 2 more live streams today. One is just after 1.5 hours with Greg Lowe on Enterprise Power BI. And then later half of the day, we have with Ben Wesman and Anthony Nocentino on Kubernetes and big data clusters. And I will come and I will be the host for them. Thank you. Goodbye. And see you soon again in another live stream. Bye.